In Iraq, the American soldiers are in the middle of a big battle. Miles and some of his teammates go inside a falling apart building for safety as they keep shooting at the enemy. Sadly, their captain is shot in the neck and quickly dies in Miles' arms. Suddenly, an explosion makes the whole building shake, and a bright light appears before Miles goes back out to fight. As he runs up a hill, a bullet hits him in the stomach and he falls to the ground. Miles looks up and sees two missile-like objects fly by, followed by a strange aircraft that suddenly shines its light on him, making him scream before he passes out. Sometime later, Miles wakes up in pain inside a strange room. There are no windows or doors, just gray panels covering every inch from corner to corner. Miles forces himself to stand up and take a closer look at the wall, but his wound is bleeding a lot and he falls again. He cries out for help, but nobody answers, so he uses his emergency supplies to clean the wound and wrap it up. Then Miles tries using his radio, but it isn't working. When he looks up, he sees the word abandon on a wall, which wasn't there before. He tries asking for help again, and this time he tries a few words he knows in Arabic, but it doesn't work. When he looks again, the wall now says abandon all, and the floor shows save the sinner's soul. Miles takes another look, and now the phrase says abandon all hope. Starting to feel dizzy, Miles takes off his backpack and his clothes, realizing the room's temperature is going up fast. His body sweats a lot, and he starts freaking out, hitting the wall as he begs to be let out. His sweat boils when it drips on the ground, and Miles starts wondering if he's actually dead, slowly losing his mind and getting paranoid to the point he grabs his gun to shoot at the walls. Eventually, the heat is too much, and he falls to the ground, screaming in unbearable pain before passing out. When Miles wakes up, the temperature is back to normal. He quickly grabs his flask for water, but suddenly the room starts spinning. Miles is thrown around, getting hurt as he hits the spinning wall. After a few minutes, the spinning stops, and Miles sees the room has shifted. Some of his belongings are now stuck on the ceiling. Shocked, he initially thinks he's dreaming. Once he calms down, he tries the radio again. After several minutes of silence, he hears a woman's voice, but the call ends quickly. Realizing the room might be bending the signal, he remembers his cell phone, which is on the ceiling. Unable to recall the number, he uses binoculars to read the sticker and carves the number into the floor with his knife. Suddenly, the phone starts ringing. Miles tries to jump for it, but only worsens his injury. He throws a shoe, but it gets stuck on the ceiling too. Frost starts forming on the walls, so he quickly puts on whatever clothes he can reach and curls up as the frost covers his face. Moments later, the frost vanishes, leaving Miles with purple fingers. He rubs his body for warmth, and when the phone rings again, he angrily ignores it. Suddenly, an alarm sounds, and the room starts moving again, causing the phone to fall. As Miles is painfully tossed around, he manages to grab the phone just before the spinning stops. He also retrieves his helmet and tucks a photo of his wife and daughter into his pocket. After chewing some gum he had hidden, he checks the phone's call log and redials the number. At first, there's only static, but then he hears a woman's voice. She tells him she's been kidnapped and is in a spinning room. Miles asks her to describe it, and when she mentions there are no light sources, but she can still see, Miles realizes they're in the same situation. He notices his arm, realizing their bodies might be the light sources. Miles asks more questions, but the woman, Damie, panics, thinking he's part of a scam. Frustrated, Miles yells that he's trapped and bleeding too. Damie apologizes and agrees to work together. She says she was on a highway before being kidnapped. Miles recalls his team was near a highway, and when Damie asks if he was stationed there, Miles freaks out, realizing he never mentioned being a soldier. Damie reassures him, saying she guessed based on his questions and the way he talks. At that moment, Damie stops speaking and grunts in pain instead. Miles's tags are suddenly pulled back, and the chain starts choking him as an invisible force opens his arms as well, making him drop the phone. His body starts floating, and a bright light appears, pulling all his limbs before dropping him to the ground. On the phone, Damie can be heard being dropped too. Then Miles hears a weird noise and warns Damie that the room is about to move again. However, instead of spinning, this time, the walls start moving inward. Miles panics and tries to push a wall, only to fall and pass out. When Miles wakes up, he realizes the room has shrunk even more, triggering a panic attack. Damie calls again, and she tells him her room has also shrunk. Sensing his distress, she gently talks him through calming down. Then, she starts cursing as she painfully pops her shoulder back into place. Miles notices unfamiliar words on the walls, and Damie confirms that they're in her room too. She explains that no one physically grabbed her when she was on the highway in Massachusetts, which makes Miles question how they're communicating. His phone is supposed to be on a closed network, and he still believes they're in Iraq. Damie also panics, realizing that setting up something like this would take days. Yet she's only been there for about an hour. She's confused because she's not someone important and can't figure out why she was taken. However, she recalls seeing the same strange things in the sky as Miles before she was kidnapped. Miles starts shouting at the walls, hoping Damie is in a nearby bunker, but she can't hear him. Curious about how she got his number, Damie explains it appeared on her ceiling. Suddenly, the phone beeps with another call. Miles tells Damie to call back later and answers it. A man speaking a different language begins talking, so Miles asks for English. The man struggles, but manages to say that they can't win because they can't solve the equation and must die. Before Miles can ask more, the call ends and Damie calls back. Miles asks her if she knows anything about an equation while changing his bandages, but she doesn't see any equation. Damie then suggests they figure out why they were chosen since she doubts it was random. She shares that she's an algebra teacher engaged to a former soldier, though she sounds unhappy about how much her fiancé changed after returning from war. Miles, in turn, admits that his relationship with his wife is strained. As he eats the last of his rations, he notices words on the walls with years ranging from 1951 to 2007. He thinks they're just tricks because, for him, it's 1991. Damie laughs, realizing he's not using a smartphone, and mentions things like social media and selfies. But Miles is clueless about them. Suddenly, the room starts glowing and emitting a noise so intense that Miles' ears begin to bleed. Despite the pain, he checks his watch and notices the room's movements are happening more frequently. He quickly scribbles the times on his arm before the pain becomes unbearable, and he passes out. When he regains consciousness, he's trembling and struggling to breathe. The phone is ringing, but he's too weak to answer it. The word "answer" appears on the wall, so he forces himself to take the call. Miles tells Damie there isn't enough air, and he finally realizes the room has shrunk. Damie says the same thing happened to her and shares her theory. She believes that she, Miles, and others are in the same room, but in different years. She asks him to draw something on the wall, so Miles makes an X, which is then surrounded by a hand drawn by Damie in her time, which is 2020. She talks about the fourth dimension and mentions she's always been above average in math, prompting Miles to admit he's also good at math, though he never pursued academics. Feeling exhausted, Miles collapses and suggests that these beings are probably testing their bodies with the room's strange changes. He asks Damie about the future and is disheartened to learn the war is still ongoing. Miles refers to it as the sins of the father and begins to share more. The movie ends. Thanks for watching.